All right, it's a new week here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know the website. I always say it, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting right there, Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com. And our YouTube channel here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can click the subscribe button right down there. You can click the like button over there somewhere, wherever you see it on your YouTube screen. Click the like button and hit the subscribe. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content that we have right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Hope you had a good weekend. Lots to get into and discuss today. I thought we'd just kind of recap and wrap up a few of the things that happened this weekend or were talked about this weekend. I actually just sort of scrolled through the message board, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board at Panther-Lair.com, just to see like what were people talking about this weekend. What were the most interesting topics going around this weekend? And one, DraftKings released an over/under on Pitt wins, losses this season. Over/under on wins, I should say. And the number was 6.5. This is very early. This is like May 7th, right? I was trying to look up like histories of Pitt over/under totals and you know, obviously whether they hit or not. And I found an article about last year's over/under total where ESPN had written about it in like mid-July. So you're still very early in the process. This is like one of the first numbers that's really come out. I'm sure there was something that came out in like January or the day after the national championship game, early over/unders and all this stuff. But 6.5 is a number that we can talk about here today on May 8th. And certainly we can talk about more numbers as they become available over the next couple of months. I think everyone involved understands that it's a little bit silly to be talking about over/under totals, even at this stage of the game. I mean, it's post-spring camp, but there's still roster movement to be made, mostly in the form of additions. You know, I mean, there's still good players out in the transfer portal who are looking for homes that are going to end up on teams where they could impact, half a win, or a win and a half. You add the right player to the right situation, and you could have a considerable impact. Certainly someone like a quarterback, certainly someone like an offensive skill player, or even a defensive player. I think there are a lot of ways you can impact the win totals for teams with additions. And certainly the Pitt football staff is still looking to try to do that. They've got a couple open scholarship spots. We talked on Friday about how they landed Jackson Brown, the offensive lineman. I don't know if he's going to really affect their outcomes in 2023, barring injury. But there's still additions to be made, and still rosters can still be changed and improved and upgraded. Ideally, when you're adding players out of the transfer portal, you'd like to think that you're upgrading something, either your starting line or your depth or whatever it is. And so when we talk about over/under numbers in the second week of May, we're probably getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. But it's still worth talking about here because the number is 6.5, and that's a pretty low number. Last year, I think Pitt was at 8.5, which they needed to beat UCLA in the Sun Bowl to top that number. But it's funny because the article I found was a guy from ESPN. I think he's a betting expert or something. I forget what his name is. Was talking about Pitt being picked at 8.5. Talked about everything they lost on offense and how you should take the under on Pitt ASAP. And these betting guys always use this. And it's actually not just these betting guys. It's anyone who writes about betting or tweets about bets. Hammer that over now. Give me those points ASAP. Take those points before Vegas realizes they screwed up. Jeez. They all sound like promos from the Jim Rome show in 2003 or something like that. It probably still goes on now. I don't know. I'm sure there's still betting guys. Actually, there's probably more betting guys all over the radio than there were 20 years ago. But it reminds me of those guys of like, get in on this action now. Get our top picks, our guaranteed stone cold lead pipe locks of the weekend and all this nonsense, So 6.5, I haven't seen any of the stone cold lead pipe locks on 6.5, but it sure feels to me like they should hit the over on that number. And I understand the concerns about Pitt. I mean, shoot, I've talked about the concerns about Pitt. I'll continue talking about the concerns about Pitt. I know the concerns about Phil Dracovic. I know the concerns about this offense and the skill players. I know the concerns about losing 6 starters off the defense. Believe me, I get all of that. I've written about all of that, and I've talked about all of that plenty of times, and I'll continue to do it throughout the summer. I was tallying up the number of these Morning Pitt episodes we have left before, basically until August, and I still have like 65 or so between now and the start of August. And that, you take out every Friday, if we do a mailbag episode, we're down to about 50 some. And if you figure we're going to do at least one episode on each position group, just kind of previewing it heading into training camp, still down to about 40 or 41 episodes that we're going to do between now and then. So we'll talk plenty about the issues that this Pitt team has. But there is a part of me that sort of feels that the program as a whole is past the point of 6-win seasons. Now that's not to say they're immune to 6-win seasons. That's not to say that a 6-win season cannot happen. But I think they're at a point now where, barring catastrophic injury or incredibly bad luck, and most likely some combination thereof, they're probably going to be pretty consistently avoiding those 6-win seasons. And it's been a while. I mean, Pat Narduzzi has had one season where he won less than 6 games, right? I mean, he has not had a 6-6 season. They had 4 in a row with Todd Graham and 3 years of Paul Chryst. They went 6-6 in the regular season each of those years. Narduzzi's worst season was the 5-7 season in 2017, where they closed it out by beating Miami, and they turned around the next year and won the Coastal Division. They had a 6-5 season. Okay, so they had a 6-win season the year they only played 11 games. So, okay, he's had a 6-win season, but he hasn't had a 6-6 season. And I think it's probably unlikely that they're going to be trafficking in those kinds of seasons. I think he's built the floor of the program up. I think he's built the depth of the program up. There's stability in the program. Although it's funny, and I don't think I'll forget this, and I don't think he will either. Will Graves from the Associated Press and I distinctly remember sitting before a game last fall. We're sitting at the in the media lunch area, the media dining area at Acrisure Stadium, and we're talking, and we're having a conversation, breaking bread together and chatting, and he says to me, Will says, it really sort of feels like Narduzzi's got this program at a point where, they're past blowing games like this. This is pregame. We're talking about this. He says it really feels like they're at a point where they should be able to win games like this consistently. He's raised the floor. It feels like Narduzzi has raised the floor of this program overall. And I said, yeah, I think so. I think it's really in a strong place, and they really seem to have a bright future on it. Now, that was the game. That was the day of the Georgia Tech game. and the game in question was, yes, Georgia Tech. And Will was saying it seems like Narduzzi has lifted the program past the point of blowing games like that, which a few hours later, Will and I looked at each other and reminisced. I can't say fondly, but we reminisced about that conversation. But I do think the floor of the program has been lifted. I've said for a long time that I think the floor for this program in a regular season should be 8 wins. And that should be sort of the standard expectation, to get 8 wins and then, attempt to achieve above that. Occasionally you're going to have a year where you fall short of that. Occasionally you're going to have a year where you come in under 8 wins. You'd like to not have that happen very often. You certainly don't want to have it happen in consecutive years. You want it to be sort of a one-off or an oddball or a unique extreme situation. But pretty consistently you should shoot for 8. And I don't see a reason why this team this year, despite its question marks, which are considerable, I don't see a reason why this team this year should not be able to shoot for 8 as well. You go down the schedule here, and obviously that first month is daunting. 5 games in the month of September. All 4 out of the 5 against Power 5 opponents. They open with Wofford, and they have Cincinnati at home. Then they go to Morgantown. I mean, you know the schedule, right? And then they close out with Carolina at home and Virginia Tech on the road. They obviously should beat Wofford. Cincinnati at home, quite frankly, with the transition that program has had, should be a win. I don't think West Virginia is necessarily shaping up to be very good this year. That should be a win, even on the road. Carolina at home, going to be tough. going to be tough. But if we're counting our wins, if we're counting the wins that we're projecting here, you're looking at 3 in the first 3 games. I think they should open the season 3-0. I think that's a reasonable expectation. Carolina in week 4 at home, but that's going to be a challenge. Let's set that one aside for a second. Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, not easy to win down there. We know that. But Virginia Tech is also a mess. We know that. Virginia Tech is going to have to prove to me that they've got some sort of stability in that program before I'm going to buy into them. So I'm going to count that. So you're looking at Pitt coming out of those first 5 games at 4-1. They get an off week and then they host Louisville. I'm not, I don't know what to expect out of Louisville with the coaching change. I'm going to say that, Pitt was at Louisville last year with Malik Cunningham at quarterback, and they gave that game away. I don't know if I'm going to put it in they should definitely win that game, but I'm going to put it closer to the win than the loss side. Wake Forest, I'm on the road. Dave Clawson's a good coach, but they don't have Sam Hartman. I'm sure Wake Forest fans would tell you that they have another quarterback waiting in the wings, but I'm gonna call wins out of those 2, and I'm gonna say I wouldn't be surprised if Pitt opens the season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-1. I mean, 6-1 is a realistic. And you know what? Let's say one gets away from them. Let's say one of those gets away. All right, and they're 5-2. Okay, 5-2. They go to Notre Dame. We know they can win there, but I think we also know that it takes something extra to win there. It took Tyler Palko throwing all those touchdown passes in 2004, right? It took Connor Lee making a bunch of field goals to win it in 2008, and LaShawn McCoy being outstanding. You need some superhero efforts to win, and some big plays, some clutch plays, which they've not gotten on subsequent trips out there. They've gotten close a number of times, 2012 and 2018 in particular. But you need something extra. I'm not going to assume they get that something extra. And I'm not going to assume they beat Florida State at home either. That's a tough game. I think Florida State, I don't know if I'm buying into all the hype, but I'll buy into a decent amount of it and say that's tough. So let's say they're at 5-4 now with 3 games left to play. They need 2 more to hit the over, and they need 3 more. They need to win all 3 to reach that floor like we talked about. Of course, it starts with Syracuse in the Bronx at Yankee Stadium. Pitt should win that game. Period, point blank. And then they have Boston College at home. Ditto. And then they close the regular season at Duke. Now, at that point, they should be no worse than 7-4. At that point. Going to Duke with a chance to either, to either hit that 8-win floor like we've talked about, or finish 7-5 with a chance to get to 8 wins with the bowl game, which would be a disappointing season. It'd be disappointing to have a 5-loss season, but that's where they should be. If that's the case, before we even talk about the Duke game, before you even consider what might or might not happen in Durham that day, the over is hit. And I'm not calling for anything crazy. Not saying they go to Notre Dame and win. I'm not saying they beat Florida State. I'm not saying they beat Carolina. And I'm actually saying they drop one of those other games, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Louisville. I'm saying they lose one of those games in there, which, it sort of accounts for that. Pitt fans always build in that possibility of a screw-up game. A blown opportunity. So, I'm even accounting for that. I don't know what it might be, but I'm accounting for it. If they don't have that, then they're 8-3 going into the Duke game. And that's just with losing to Carolina, Notre Dame, and Florida State. And I put Carolina on there because the quarterback's really, really good. And that's tough. I don't know if Pitt's going to be able to win a quarterback duel against Drake May. But it's fine. It's fine. It would be disappointing if they come out of the season at, 8-4 or 9-3, but the 3 losses are Carolina, Notre Dame, and Florida State. But either way, if that's the case, let's say they just lose those 3, or they lose those 3 plus 1, you're still getting out of the regular season with potentially 8 or 9 wins, probably at a minimum 7, and you're hitting that over. I'm surprised at the over/under being that low. Again, I understand concerns about Phil Dracovic. I understand concerns about the receiving core. I understand concerns about losing Izzy Abanikanda. I can understand concerns about losing 6 defensive starters. I get all those things. But I don't think Drakovic's going to be worse than Keaton Slovis. Rodney Hammond et al. May not be as good as Izzy Abanikanda, but I think they've got a big group of guys there who can contribute, who can play. I don't think the receiving core is going to be worse than it was last year. And look, I know Jared Wayne had a really good season. Really kind of lit up the scoreboard and the stat line at the end of the year when they fed him a bunch of targets. I mean, I guess, okay, so yeah, the receiving core will be a bit of a step down, but I don't think it was all that much of a step up to begin with last year. So it might be a step down, but they're just kind of going from here to here as opposed to like here to here, which is the case in 2021. They were here and they went to here in 2022. I think 2022 they'll go here to here in 2023. And probably on the screen that looked like my hand almost went completely off the screen. And then on the defensive side, 6 starters to replace, but you know what the sports books may or may not consider is the recruiting that's been done on that side of the ball. Here's my one concern. I've said this a few times. This is the one thing that concerns me. You have a few key positions on defense where you're replacing starters. You're replacing 6, like we said, but you're replacing both of those safeties. I do worry about one of those first 2 Power 5 non-conference games of Cincinnati and West Virginia. I do worry that you end up losing one of those games because you have a mistake in the deep secondary. And that's possible. Those probably will be close games. I would think the game at West Virginia, being on the road, it'll be a close game. And if that's the case, one mistake, one misread, one missed assignment could be the difference, in that game. And then you end up with an extra loss that maybe I'm not accounting for. Or maybe that's that extra loss that I was kind of accounting for. When I said Carolina, Notre Dame, Florida State, and one other, maybe that's the one other as it comes in that first month. Now you leave yourself no wiggle room or no room for error against Louisville or Virginia Tech or Wake Forest. But again, not to make it sound like this program is, at Alabama's level, but they should be in a position where you have kind of where you can handle those kinds of games. You know what I mean? Where you are, expected to win. You should be expected to win in Blacksburg. You should be expected to win in Winston-Salem. And you should be expected to beat Syracuse at home or in the Bronx or Yankee Stadium or wherever they want to play that game. You should be expected to beat Boston College at home. You should be expected to beat Louisville at home. I think as the years go on with Narduzzi as the coach and this program sort of being established as it is, the list of teams that you should not have that expectation of and I know you got to go into every game expecting to win every game and all that kind of stuff, but I think the list keeps shrinking. I'm not at the point now where you're going to go into a Carolina game and you're expecting to win it. I'm not at the point now where you're going to go into a Florida State game or a Notre Dame game or a Clemson game or even a Miami game expecting to win. Not in the same way that you should go into a game against Georgia Tech, last season notwithstanding, or Syracuse or Virginia Tech expecting to win. You should go into those games with a certain expectation of victory that maybe you don't have against some of those other teams, but that list of those other teams keeps shrinking. All right, when you have been one of the, the second most successful ACC program since the league expanded, when you basically have they have the second most wins after Clemson, right? You should expect to win all of these kinds of games. And you should expect to hit that floor of at least 8 wins every season. Like that should be the built-in win total that you build on. You shouldn't be building to get to 8. You should be expecting 8 and building from there, trying to build to 9 like they did last year, trying to build to 11 like they did the year before. 2020, they only played 11 games, so that doesn't count. 2019, they had to sort of scratch and claw to get to 8 wins. But that's kind of my point, is this evolution we've seen over the last few years of where the program should be now. So I'm not a betting expert. I'm not one of these guys who's going to yell into the radio, But if you can get the over on 6.5 wins, I think that seems like a smart bet. And it's not even the favorite. I feel like it's like minus 100 or minus 120 to take the under. So maybe Vegas knows more than we do. Maybe DraftKings has no idea what they're talking about. Maybe it's just way too early for all of this stuff. But I think if you can get 6.5, you should probably hit the over, because I'm pretty sure Pitt will. All right, that was one thing we talked about this week, and there's other stuff to talk about, but hey, we got all week, right? Make sure you stay tuned here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then head over and check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, and recruiting, and lots of conversations like about this. Should you hit 6.5? What should you do with that number? So go check it out, Panther-Lair.com. We appreciate you tuning in this morning. Hope you had a great weekend and hope you have a great Monday coming up. We'll be back again to talk to you tomorrow right here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.